We've got a pretty fun episode on tap today for the Kansas Dynasty here on EA College Football 25. As we've got our recruiting special here for season number 3. We're going to go through everybody on our recruiting board, assess them as prospects, go through some highlights, and talk about how they could potentially fit on our team if they were to commit to us. We've got a number of prospects who are very close to deciding where they want to go to school. Many players, these recruiting battles are going to wrap up within the next couple of weeks. Guys like Kyrie Brower and Tyler Leckerkirker are already down to 3. We're going to go over where we are in many of these races that are going to be heating up. I would say this point through like week 10 is certainly the busiest point of the year in terms of recruiting when a lot of these battles are going on. In the last episode, we split our 2 games, beating UAB and then losing to Florida. And since we've got a bye week today, we will go through week 4 across the country. Along with that, we're going to assess where our team currently is, given that we're a very young roster and many of the key players now will continue to be key players down the line. I think the best way to do this is to go over certain position groups as we do it in the recruiting special. So I think that's going to be the play. But first, we're going to talk about Tyler Leckerkirker real quick because we're not doing too well in this battle. We're putting as many hours into him as possible, and Kentucky is still getting more influence on him. Not to mention, he'll be visiting them this week. I knew it was a little bit bold last week to keep putting points into him, but we had some points left over. I figured it was worth a shot. Doesn't look like it's going to happen, so we're going to cut our losses now, take him off the board. He's a lock to go to Kentucky. And then to replace him, we're going to add 3-star linebacker Jason McBean. Not to be confused with the former Kansas quarterback Jason Bean. So we're going to scout him and do all the scholarship stuff later as we talk about him as a prospect. First things first, let's go over the quarterback position. We've got 2 4-stars on our board currently. Right now, QB is not a position we're really focused on because I think there's a good chance the long-term starting quarterback is on the roster. Maybe that's Clyde Poole. Maybe that's one of these freshmen like Sean Pullard or Kerry Chosen or even DeAndre Rainbolt. We'll start with Poole. We know what we've got with him, and the concern is that he's hit his peak. In terms of his overall rating, he's not going to get any better than this. So is what we have right now good enough to be the long-term quarterback? And the answer, I don't know. Clyde Poole is obviously a dynamic, polarizing player. He's a big-time rushing threat who's been solid as a passer throughout his career, but he's been a little shaky this year. 6 interceptions over the last 2 weeks. He only threw 8 last year, but he has cut down on the fumbles. 10 last year, none this year. There's also Sean Pullard and Kerry Chosen, both of whom got some run in the UAB game. Chosen only threw the ball twice, but I was really impressed with what we got from him. Pullard, Chosen, and Rainbolt all have star development, and they all have higher ceilings than Poole. So one of those guys could easily pass him up in the future. Nonetheless, I am confident in the QB room overall, but I figured we might as well still go after some guys. It never hurts to add more competition, and maybe one of these 2 players breaks out and becomes the long-term starter. And we'll open up with Carl Willingham from Shakopee, Minnesota. He's currently playing at Minnetonka High School. The 33rd ranked quarterback in the nation. I really like what Willingham brings to the table. He's big, physical, 6'5", 221 pounds. He can really run. A dynamic scrambler with 89 speed, 91 acceleration, and the arm talent is there. 91 throw power, pretty good accuracy ratings, and he's a gem. So there's a lot to like with Willingham. I think he easily could be a really high-level power conference starting quarterback pretty soon. And then there's Chris Paul, a 4-star from St. Charles, Missouri. We're currently in 4th place with him, and my strategy in these recruiting battles is to be as close to the top once the player narrows his list down to 5 as possible. And the fact that we're in 4th obviously isn't ideal. We've got some groundwork to make up. The 4-star prospect from Duchesne High School is still a very talented player in his own right. Like Willingham, big guy, 6'5", 200. He's got the arm talent. I don't think he's quite as explosive on the ground as Willingham, though. But the interesting thing with him is look who's ahead of us in this battle. Missouri's number 1, Kansas State is number 2. Those are our 2 biggest rivals. So as much as I would like to get him, we would also be poaching him from a rival, which is a double win. Let's move over to the offensive skill position players now, and you'll notice there aren't that many on the board. We went after a lot of skill position guys last year. That was a big need for us. We have a lot of true freshman contributors at running back and wide receiver. So because of that, I feel like we don't need to go after as many this year, but we've got a few guys to talk about, including 2 running backs. Of course, our approach at the running back position is very unconventional. We've got 5 pretty good players here, and they all pretty much split carries between the 5 of them. And you can make the argument that none of them have the highest upside in our running back room. Reed Sharp is the big wild card here. He was a top 40 player in last year's high school class, star development, really high ceiling, but we've made the decision to redshirt him for right now, given him flipping his commitment to Minnesota in the offseason and then re-flipping back to us. He lost valuable time to learn out on the playbook, which has hindered his playing time. Of these 5 running backs we currently have on the roster, the one who I think has been the best through the last 3 games is actually Ty Lord, one of our 2 true freshmen. He's averaging over 8 yards per carry. Granted, much of those comes off of a 64-yard run against Missouri, but I think he's been our most dependable guy. And late in the game against Florida when we were coming back, he was getting a majority of the snaps because I thought he was playing the best. Everybody else has been pretty solid, averaging at least 5 yards per carry. Granted, when we played against the better defense in Florida, it wasn't as pretty. Johnny Thompson's got the experience. Harry Stewart's the speed threat. Jazir Tolbert is the well-rounded, big, bruising power back. And Cornell Teamer, I think, is the most big play threat of these 5 guys. They're all really good. They're all different in their own ways. We can't forget about Reed Sharp as well. And we've got 2 more guys we're going after. And we'll start with Greg Yu from Aurora, Illinois, and Aurora Central Catholic. The 4-star is in a tight battle. Michigan seems to have the upper hand on him. Kansas State also in the mix as well, so we certainly don't want them to land him. 6 foot, 192 pounds, 93 speed, 92 acceleration, 91 agility, and 90 change of direction. In other news, this guy is shifty. He moves quick and he is explosive. He needs to be more consistent as a runner, consistent in terms of making guys miss, but he's got the athletic profile to be a really good player, and the fact that he's a gem leads me to believe that he's got a really good chance of hitting his ceiling. The other player here is Nicholas Scotland Williamson from St. Brendan High School in Miami. UCF is our biggest competitor here. Of course, we were in a big race with them last year for a running back, Cornell Teamer, who UCF had the lead for throughout most of the cycle, but we stole him away at the end, and we're looking to take another running back from the Knights. Nicholas Scotland Williamson is probably one of my favorite players on the board, period, because he's so unique. 5'10", 230, he's built like a power back, and that's exactly what he can do. He's dominant in the short yardage game between the tackles, big physical runner. But he also runs a 4.3, which is very unusual for players with his skill set and his size. The fact that he also is a gem, again, leads me to believe that he can really hit his ceiling as we move over to wide receiver. This was a big position of need for us last year. Not as much this year, since we got some really good players in recruiting last year. Of course, Mario Maddox in the slot. I really like him coming off his best career game against Florida. But what pops here for the future is these young guys. Amani Law, Rajon Jones, Dorian Pepper, all players who have big chances to be part of the future. Amani Law in particular, because he's been so impressive through the first 3 games of the year. And he has really shown me so far that he can be a big cornerstone for this offense. He has been fantastic to start this year. Rajon Jones has been a little more inconsistent, and I'm not sure what the ceiling is with Dorian Pepper. But I know we've got a really good player with Amani Law. I think Rajon Jones has some real upside, and I think Mario Maddox has room to continue to grow, even though he already is a redshirt junior. So because of that, I felt like we didn't need to have as many receivers on the board. Last year, I think we had 5. This year, there's only 2. We'll start with Rasheem Diggs from Inman, South Carolina. He goes to Chapman High School, the alma mater of another very talented receiver, Deebo Samuel. 6'4", 200 pounds. Big receiver, really excels off of press coverage, as you can see on that rep. Isn't necessarily a burner, but he can run 87 speed. He's more of your traditional jump ball guy, though, and I don't think we have that type of player on our roster. Amani Law is a burner. Rajon Jones is a consistent route runner who's also quite fast. Mario Maddox, not the biggest. So Diggs gives us something we don't already have. Then there's Dakota Cornelius, one of the lowest ranked players on the board. But that doesn't deter me. I really like his skill set from Edwardsville High School in Illinois. He is 5'10", less than 180 pounds. I think he could be a really good fit in the slot. Of course, we got the big game last week from Maddox. In Season 1, we got big production in the slot from Luke Grimm. I think Dakota Cornelius could be next with some development. He's a little bit raw, but he's got great short area quickness, which is one of the most important things I look for in terms of slot receivers. He needs to improve as a route runner, but since he's a gem, I think he's got the chance to do it. With Diggs being a bust, I'm not sure if there's that big of a gap between these two receiver prospects, even though their rankings would tell you that there is. There's only one tight end on the board. Of course, we have Isaiah Lamore here, the talented sophomore, along with Jaden Ham and Pierre Johnson behind him, both of whom are good depth pieces. But as we look at Lamore, he's a talented player who I'm confident can be our starter up until he graduates as a senior. The thing is, as you can see, he's kind of capped out, which I didn't really expect originally with him being a gem when he came out of high school and having star development. But it looks like his ceiling is pretty much where it is right now. If that's the case, again, I think we're looking at a good player like Mario Maddox. He had his first career 100-yard game last week against Florida. Seems like him and Clyde Poole were really on the same page in that game, and I'm hoping that the chemistry between the two of them will continue to grow. So because of that, I don't feel like tight end's a super big need right now. We've only got one guy on the board, and that's Edward Brzezinski from Kernersville, North Carolina, and East Forsyth High School. He's not some big dynamic athlete. He's not some crazy receiving threat. He's more of a blocking tight end, and I don't think he's ever going to become a starter here or anything, but I like him as a depth piece and a guy who we can roll out in 12 personnel sets when we want multiple tight ends on the field. That moves us to the offensive line. We've had some inconsistent play up front in the trenches this year. Regardless of how good the offensive line is, though, I'm always going to want to have guys on the board because you can never have too much talent. We've got some good players as is on the line. James Livingston at guard, I think, has a chance to be an NFL player one day. Spencer Fano at right tackle, the transfer from Utah. He hasn't gotten off to a great start, but I'm confident he'll pick it up. I like the youth we had on the offensive line, though. We had some big gets last year through recruiting. Reggie Chanel at left tackle. Benji Trahan at right guard. Kenyon Denbo at right tackle. Terrell Butts, who's currently starting at center. We've got a number of players who I think have a chance to be long-term starters on the offensive line. But again, it doesn't hurt to add more talent. It doesn't hurt to add more guys into the room, more competition. Iron sharpens iron. So we've got two tackles, and that starts with Jaden Adai, who, in terms of his player ranking, is one of the best players on the board, a top 50 prospect in the nation, and it is a tight battle for him. That's probably going to wrap up within the next couple of weeks. Right now, we're not in first, but we are firmly in the mix, and I'm hoping to close out the deal. And I think we've got a good chance to do so because I'm planning on inviting him to campus to visit for our Week 5 matchup against Arizona. He plays for Blue Valley Northwest High School, which is pretty much right in our backyard. I think within probably 30 minutes of campus. So because of that, we've gotten plenty of chances to watch him. He's a player we're very familiar with, and we feel really confident about him joining our program. He was teammates at Blue Valley Northwest High School for 2 years with current Kansas running back Jazir Tolbert. So I'm hoping Tolbert can get in his ear about potentially coming here. Many other notable Kansas names have gone to school there, including national champion basketball player Christian Brown. I like Adai's skill set. He moves really well for a guy his size, and I think that type of movement ability presents high upside, even though he is listed as a bust. Then there's Kiki Hall, who spent the first 3 years of his high school career at Lincoln East High School before transferring to Mission Viejo all the way in California, one of the top high school programs in the nation. This is another guy who I think moves really well at his size. Not quite as big as Adai, 6'4", 306, but I do think he's got an intriguing athletic skill set. He seems to like the idea of potentially returning home to the University of Nebraska, but if it's not them, I think we've got the best chance to land him. We've got two guards on the board. Frank Story, again, one of the highest ranked players here, the 39th ranked player in the nation, so a very highly graded 4-star. He's from Greenwood, Indiana, and currently attends Sensor Grove High School, the alma mater of Carson Steele, Warrior legend Trace Jackson Davis, and former Kansas edge rusher Austin Booker, who's now with the Chicago Bears. This is a people mover in the run game. Really impressive rep right there, but he's also quite athletic, very nimble on his feet. Kansas State has the lead, so again, we're going to be in a tight recruiting battle with one of our biggest rivals, which should be quite interesting. Then there's Caleb Wilson from Putnam City High School, ranked nearly 400 spots lower than Story. Don't get it twisted, though. I wouldn't be surprised if Wilson ends up being the better prospect. We're currently in second place here as well. Arkansas's got a little bit of a lead, but we are still certainly in the mix. I really like Wilson's skill set. He's more of a pure power blocker. He's got an incredible anchor in the run game, 94 strength, 86 impact block. He's got some solid abilities, and the fact that he's a gem leads me to believe that there's a lot of room for him to grow, and I could easily see him becoming a high-level power conference starter. He's also bigger than Frank Story as well. Story's quite a bit undersized. But I think he's more polished and has better technique than Wilson does right now. As we move over to the center position, we've got two guys here, starting with Mike Jefferson from Lombard, Illinois, and Glenbard East High School. His number one deal breaker is pro potential. He wants to go to the NFL. So I think the best thing that he can do is see what we've done with Bryce Foster over the last couple of years. A similar player in the sense that Foster was an absolute freak, played pretty well at center. We moved him around at guard. NFL teams loved the athleticism and versatility, and he was picked in the first round this past year by the Lions. I think there are some similarities with Jefferson. Obviously, he's got a long ways to go before we can talk about him being a first-round draft pick. But I think that can be our pitch to him, and I hope that's enough to land him. There's also Kion Ferrotti. He's from Watertown, Wisconsin, and Watertown High School. Tight race here. He likes the idea of staying at home, going to the University of Wisconsin, but we're firmly in the mix. An athletic lineman who can play all over the offensive line, and that's going to be important for both of these guys because we've recruited centers really well. We got 3 good ones last year. Benji Trahan, we've already moved over to guard, and we could see more guys kick outside in the future. 9 players on the defensive line. Certainly an area we're focused on. You can never have too many pass rushers. I think in terms of overall talent, though, this is one of the strengths of our team. Obviously, Seth Jennings and Dekias Brinkley both are immensely talented. We still need to see the two of them, especially Jennings, really put it together. But they have 2 of the highest ceilings on the roster. We've got some intriguing depth and intriguing young players. Guys like Devin Murphy and Kerry Folk are 2 players who I think have a lot of upside. Athia Kiaho has shown some flashes this year as a redshirt freshman. Marcus Calvin's had a good year. Of course, Travion Ford has played really well, but the big keys on the defensive line are Brinkley and Jennings. Dekias Brinkley had 16 sacks as a true freshman, and he just hasn't really been the same player since. I didn't expect him to quite put up the sack production as his freshman year, but he has taken a step down from that first year. And then Jennings, only half a sack so far through 3 games. The numbers don't meet the talent, but we've seen the flashes with him. I might kick him back inside. That's where he played his best last year. That seems to be where he's most comfortable. I still think he is the highest ceiling of any player on our entire roster currently, as shown by his plus 10 rating boost last year. But nonetheless, those guys have not put up the numbers that we have hoped for over the last couple of years, and it wouldn't hurt to add more talent into the defensive line room, including 5-star Afa Gee from Lenexa, Kansas. Not every day do we have someone from our state as a 5-star. This was the case last year with Quantavius Landers, and now the case with Afa Gee, who goes to Blue Valley Southwest High School. We already looked at a prospect from one of their rivals, Blue Valley Northwest. Gee is the total package coming off the edge. Impressive athleticism, good get-off, good strength, good size, and he can do a little bit of everything. He's best when using his finesse and his speed. It's a slow-moving battle right now. Kansas State seems to be our top competitor. There's a good chance he's staying in state. Jadarius Elam from Eureka, Missouri, and Eureka High School is up next. He's a talented 4-star prospect. We're not doing overly well in this battle, though. We've got some work to do. 6'4", 253. Very similar size and very similar skill set to that of Afa Gee. He's just worse overall. And then we got Josh Metz, another 4-star, a fringe top 300 guy. I think he's a better run stopper than these 2 prospects that we've already talked about, but I don't think he's got the upside as an edge rusher coming after the quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to put up the great sack numbers, but I think this is someone you can trust on early downs to make plays in the backfield and clog rushing lanes. He comes from Bishop Dorberg High School in St. Louis, Missouri. He's played against some really good competition in the city, so I think he's going to be pretty battle-tested. There's a few teams quite interested in him, including Missouri and Kansas State. Kyrie Brower is going to be one of the best football players on our recruiting board, and chances are it's going to be with us. He's already down to 3 schools, and we have the clear edge right now. My strategy throughout the year has been to pile points onto guys once they're down to their top 5 schools. We were already in the lead for him when he narrowed down his list to 5, and that's when we put a lot of points onto him. We've built up a big lead. Chances are we're going to close out the deal maybe as soon as next week. He's a really talented all-around player. This is someone who I think on early downs next year will be able to produce. He's a really good run defender, but he's also a good bend off the edge. And I think he's going to be someone who, if he can hit his ceiling as a pass rusher, we could be looking at a true 3-down defensive lineman. He's a gem, and he's already highly ranked to begin with, the 53rd ranked player in the class. The ceiling is really high for him from Assumption High School in Davenport, Iowa. Not the biggest school, not the best of competition, but the schools he has played against, he has dominated this season. It's going to be a big jump of competition, though. That's my big question with him. And then we've got Sam Banovich from Wheaton, Illinois and St. Francis High School. We're going after a number of players from the Chicago area. There's a lot of talent in that region, Banovich being one of them. This is another guy who I see as an early down run stopper. I think like Josh Metz, who we talked about earlier, he doesn't have the highest ceiling as a pass rusher, but he's going to be dependent on early downs. He's battle tested, and I think he's got a high floor. The last defensive end we've got here is Markel Jocelyn from Fairfield, Alabama and Fairfield High Prep. Not known for their football, but this is the same high school that Willie Mays graduated from a very long time ago. This is a guy who I think has a really intriguing all-around skill set. Not necessarily the quickest off the edge. He might be a guy who plays more defensive tackle at the next level as opposed to defensive end. I just don't think he has the quickness to match up with certain tackles. But he's strong, he's big, he's physical, he's a dominant run defender, and this is a guy who I think, like some of the other players we've talked about, are going to be able to clog rushing lanes and be a really, really consistent first and second down player. It's about developing him, though, as a pass rusher. As we move over to defensive tackle, this might be the position on the roster we're currently weakest, not really accounting for Travion Ford and Seth Jennings, who do get some snaps there. We'll start with Greg Von Olhofen from Leesburg, Georgia, and Lee County High School. While we're on the subject of Giants legends, this is the school that Buster Posey graduated from. He's more of a run defender who I think has the athleticism to eventually be a productive pass rusher. He's built like an ox, 92 strength. I'm surprised it's only a 2-team race. I like his ceiling, but it's only us and Auburn in the mix right now. Then we get to Dylan Countess, who for me is one of the more polarizing players on the board. From Wilmette, Illinois, and New Trier High School. I'm really disappointed he's a bust because I think the ceiling is still really high, and I think a lot of teams agree given the amount of interest in him across the country. 6'3", 293. He's built like a prototypical defensive tackle, but he's not. 75 speed, 85 finesse moves. That's like NFL caliber finesse ability. His blend of size and speed at that position combined with his overall quickness is just kind of unheard of. Again, I'm disappointed he's a bust. I really hope he has the work ethic to put it all together because I think he's got a chance to be one of the best players here. And then we've got Sam Chong from Chesapeake, Virginia, and Oscar F. Smith High School. Chong is another intriguing player. He's got good strength. I think he's got the upside given that he's a gem. I just think he's a little bit raw. He's got some work to do. I don't think he's as polished as the other two defensive tackles here, especially Dylan Countess, who, even though he's a bust and the other two guys are gems, I think he's the best player of the group. Nonetheless, I would hope to land all three of them so we can add some more depth inside. As we move over to linebacker, another spot that I really want to add some depth. I think this is where we're lacking, and our linebacker production this year really hasn't been all that good. Samuel Mpemba and Damani Maxson, of course, are our main two linebackers. We've got a lot of young guys here, though, who I'm looking forward to step up. Mo Nwokeji, Devontae Crispin, Santiago Herrera. We're probably going to give Zach Stokes more playing time. And I like some of these true freshmen, J.J. Addington and Soma Satele, who we're currently redshirting. However, this group just hasn't played all that well so far this year. We haven't gotten a lot of production from them in the run game as blitzers or in coverage. And along with the fact that I already felt like we needed some more depth here anyway, this is certainly a position of priority. And that starts with Leon Ibrahim, who I think is really, really good. Another guy who we're really doing well within this battle. We're clearly in the driver's seat, and I'm hoping to close the deal in the next couple of weeks. 6 foot, around 240 pounds, from Mountain View, California, and Menlo Atherton High School, the alma mater of NFL cornerback Mekhi Blackman, and current Denver Broncos wide receiver Troy Franklin. Ibrahim is more of a cover linebacker. This is someone who's really rangy, sideline to sideline, 90 speed. He's a good tackler, 82 tackles, 77 zone coverage. He's barely a top 350 player overall, but I really like his skill set. I think he could make an impact for us as soon as next year. That brings us to Jason McBean, who we've just added to the board. We're going to scout him right here, right now. And he's not a bust or a gem. I think this is somebody who can be a rotational linebacker, maybe never a great player. But I like him as depth and a guy who could potentially give us some solid snaps down the line. 6'3", 240, he's got good size. Another kid who's right in our backyard from Kansas City, Missouri, and Fort Osage High School, the alma mater of Albert Pujols. This isn't somebody who is going to be able to play right away, probably. He's really not that good in coverage right now. But I think he can be a solid run defender, high floor type of player. But I don't think there's like an NFL ceiling with him. But you need role players. And I think McBean can be that, while Leon Ibrahim can be the flashy, big play linebacker who's got the pro upside. As we move over to middle linebacker, we've got 3 players here. That starts with Bo Muse from O'Fallon, Missouri. And he's currently going to school at Wentzville Holt High School. A lot of teams in the mix here. A slow-moving battle that I think is really going to heat up quick. 6'3", 230. He's got good size. Today's game, we're seeing linebackers shrink. So it's refreshing to see someone who's 6'3" and clearly has more room to grow in his body. I like his floor right off the bat as a run defender. I think given his athletic ability, he's got the ceiling as a cover guy. He just doesn't really have the coverage instincts right now. So I don't think he would have an overly high impact year one, but I think he's a very moldable player who could be really good. Taylor Kotovides is up next from Arlington, Texas, in Seguin High School. 6'1", 240 pounds. Another guy who I think is more of a run defender. Someone who's going to be on the field on early downs, but maybe doesn't have a sky-high ceiling, per se. He's got some work to do in terms of coverage, but I think given his athletic ability, like Bo Muse, there's some reason to like him. And then we get to Donovan Gossett. He's the lowest-ranked player of the group, but I think he's the best one. And as you can tell by Oregon's interest, we are not the only ones who think that. I thought we were going to win this battle, but Oregon storms in. They gave him a lot of points last week. Might not be as easy as I thought. He's currently playing at Cornier Canyon High School in Utah, a program that's quickly becoming a hotbed for talent. Zach Wilson, Isaac Wilson, Jackson Dart, Jackson Powers Johnson, amongst the notable names who have come from there. Gossett's next up. Really athletic. 89 speed, 91 acceleration. He's big, 6'3", 240. I think he's not far off as a run defender compared to these two guys, and I think he's a better cover player with more athletic upside. That moves us over to the secondary, which has been by far our biggest weakness this year. We have not gotten good play from our defensive backs, but we've still got a lot of guys I like who have potential. Caleb Purdy, of course, one of our senior captains. We've got him in the slot. Basil Wilson and Quantavius Landers have started on the outside. Both of them have been quite bad through the last 3 weeks. Landers is the 5-star. I'm going to continue to play him. I don't think we're going to redshirt him. I see the talent with him. We've gotten good flashes, whereas Basil Wilson's just been horrible the last 3 weeks and will be benched moving forward for Brian Dilworth, who had 2 interceptions against UAB. The issue of our cornerback play has been speed, which is a surprise given that Quantavius Landers, at least, is quite fast. We've got some intriguing young players behind them. Exodus Ayers, Teron Jean-Pierre, Viliami Manupuna amongst them. So we've got some guys I like, but the production just hasn't been there. I'm hoping Quantavius Landers figures it out. Regardless if he does or doesn't, I'd like to add some more guys to the defensive back room. And that starts with a 5-star, Quinn Coatney from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and Freedom High School. This is where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson graduated from, believe it or not. Coatney is the 7th-ranked high school prospect in all of America. So in other words, he's really good. This would be the highest-ranked Kansas football recruit ever, surpassing Quantavius Landers from last year. As we look at Coatney, he's got NFL athletic traits. 6'3", 190. He has 92 speed, 91 acceleration, 90 agility. He's got NFL-type upside. He's got first-round pick type upside, hence his very high recruiting ranking. He's a really good zone cover corner. 85 zone coverage, 75 man coverage. And with our struggles in man this year and probably transitioning into more of a zone style defense, he'd be a good fit. I compared him to Quantavious Landers. Landers has 81 man, which is a surprise because he's struggled in man, and only 68 zone. So Coatney's probably going to be a little bit higher rated right off the bat, which says something because Landers is a 79. Coatney's probably going to be at least an 81, 82 plus, and would probably start right away from us. There's a lot of big schools who want him. Ohio State, Penn State's only a few hours down the road from him. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to give it our best shot. If we don't land Coatney, and there's a very real shot of that, we've got some fallback options at corner, starting with Greg Ricks. We're in 4th place, which I don't love, but we're not far out of 1st. It's a very tight 5-team race where everybody is in the mix. 5'11", 183 pounds from Lee's Summit High School, another school that's not too far away from us, right in our backyard. The alma mater of Missouri Tiger Drew Lock, Kansas State Wildcat Felix Anuduke-Uzoma, and current Kansas tight end Isaiah Lamore. Again, I'm hoping Lamore's getting in his ear about potentially choosing us. He plays at his best, I feel like, in the slot. I think he's quite instinctive in terms of his ability near the line of scrimmage. He's a good zone cover corner, so again, if we were to transition to more of a zone-style defense, he'd be a good fit if that's what we're looking for. Ohio State seems to be interested, though, so that might be a tough battle. That brings us to Cornell Abreu from Houston, Texas, and this is one of my favorite storylines throughout the entire recruiting trail. So the thing I want you to keep your eye on is proximity to home, because Lawrence, Kansas, and Houston, Texas are not that close together. But I'm going to tell you why I think we had the leg up on this deal breaker over TCU and Houston, who are both in-state, and Oklahoma, that's not too far out. So Cornell Abreu goes to Strake Jesuit High School, the same school that current Kansas running back Ty Lord went to, but there's a lot more than that. Lord and Abreu grew up as childhood best friends, and here's Lord when we watched him last year. So we've gotten to watch Abreu for a few years. He's a player we're very familiar with. But there's a lot more to this story. Not only were the two of them childhood best friends, but they're also half-brothers. They are quite literally family. And we've gotten to see both of them develop into really, really good high school prospects. Lord has been great here through the first 3 weeks. And Cornell Abreu could be next. 94 speed, 91 acceleration, another really good zone cover corner. So with more zone cover plays in the mix, he would be a good fit. I'm really hoping the relationship that he has with Ty Lord will be enough to sway him to move farther away from Houston, Texas. His number one deal breaker is proximity to home, but I think we're going to be home to him more than TCU or Houston because he's going to have his stepbrother and childhood best friend in Ty Lord already here. The last cornerback on the board is Jaron McGlynn from Concord, North Carolina, and Concord Academy. This is a pretty slow-moving battle right now, but it's definitely one I want to find ourselves in the mix for. 5'11", 201 pounds. I don't think he's as good of a covered player as the first 3 guys we've gone over. He's a little bit better in man, and even though, again, we're probably going to be switching to more of a zone-style defense with our corners, we still need guys who can play man, especially in the slot, which is where he excels. McGlynn is a chess piece for the defense. You can play him all over the field, and he's going to be able to play a variety of different roles. Good run defender, good blitzer, good ball skills. It's just about the cover ability becoming more consistent. With Caleb Purdy being a senior, though, I'm not sure who our long-term nickel corner is going to be. And I think if Jaron McGlynn hits his upside, he's got a really good chance to be that guy, given his natural fit there. That brings us to the safety position. We've got some talent here. Taylor Davis has shown some good things this year. And we've got 2 really intriguing freshmen with Marcus Ashe and Brandon Hines. Both of them have played a lot this year. We've seen some ups and downs from each of them. I think Ashe has been a little bit better. He had an interception in week 2 against UAB. But Brandon Hines has doubled the amount of tackles and pretty much the same amount of snaps. I think Hines is a better fit for that Marvin Grant, Javon McIntyre role. Regardless, I like both of them. I think we're going to keep playing both of them the rest of the year, and I don't plan on redshirting either of them. Nonetheless, we're going to need a long-term replacement for Taylor Davis, and I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Hines' long-term role is more in the box, closer to the line of scrimmage. So we're going to need at least one, probably long-term starter at safety within the next couple of years, and that starts with Manu Toilolo from Manville, Texas, and Manville High School. He's a bust, unfortunately, but I don't want that to take away from his skill set. Even though he's listed as a free safety, I think he's a better fit as a strong safety, given his ability in the run game, his instincts near the line of scrimmage. He's not a very good cover player. He's going to have to get better there. He's not as good in coverage as either Marcus Ashe or Brandon Hines, so it might take a little bit for him to find the field, but I do like his overall potential. We've also got Santiago Chavez from Mansfield Summit High School in Mansfield, Texas. Another slower-moving recruiting battle. Both of these guys are ranked pretty much evenly. Toilolo is the 8th ranked free safety in the country. Chavez is ranked 9th. I think Chavez is slightly better. I mean, for one thing, he's not a bust. I think he's a little bit better as a cover player, but I think he as well is more of a run-defending safety who you have closer in the box, who you trust on early downs, but maybe isn't your traditional center field free safety style of player. I think that guy could be Cordell Hurley. Even though Cordell Hurley is ranked around 250 spots lower than both Toilolo and Chavez, I like his skill set more, and I think college coaches across the country agree because there's a lot more overall interest in him. This is a really competitive battle. Louisville seems to be putting a lot of emphasis into landing him. Not only do I think Hurley would be a better long-term free safety, I think this could also be our long-term nickel corner. And I would have to guess that that's where he's going to suit best. 6 foot, 219 pounds from Chicago, Simeon Career Academy. Known as a basketball school, Derrick Rose, Jabari Parker, amongst others. Cordell Hurley's trying to put them on the map for football. 6 foot, 220, good athleticism. His zone coverage is pretty much equal to Toilolo and Chavez. He's a lot better in man coverage, which I think, again, will suit him nicely for the slot. I think he's got good short area quickness to match up with slot receivers, and I think he's good enough in the run game as well. I think he's got a chance to be really good. He's the lowest ranked of our 4 safeties, but he might be the best one. The highest ranked of our 4 safeties is Maurice Waddy, the final player we're going to go over today from Pulaski Academy in Little Rock, Arkansas. 6 foot, 220 pounds, another more run-defending style of safety, although I think he's a little bit more college-ready than both Manu Toilolo and Santiago Chavez, which is why I think he'd probably be a better fit. I think he's got a better chance to find the field early. I don't think he's some freak athlete, but I think he's good enough. I'd love to see him improve his cover ability. He is a bust, though, so I'm not sure what the overall ceiling would look like for him. No special teamers, although we do have to recruit a punter at some point. Our current punter, Damon Greaves, is a senior. We're going to add one later in the year. Only one athlete, believe it or not, that being Carl Willingham. Everybody else has a pretty refined position. I guess the fact that Willingham is an athlete is another reason to, like him. So we currently have 40 hours to spend. We're going to be a little bit creative, though, because I want to get some visits ready for Week 5 against Arizona. We're going to put a lot of points into Kyrie Brower. I want to end this recruiting now. I want to get him today, and I hope that 55 recruiting hours would be enough. We're going to have to take some hours off of guys, however, so this is how we're going to use our points. For everybody who's down to 5 schools or less, we're putting a lot into them. Chris Paul's getting a boost, given that we're currently in 4th. I want to get him, and I don't want Missouri or Kansas State to get him. The corners are going to be getting a lot of points. Gossett's going to get 75, 35 for Countess, only 30 for Leon Ibrahim. I think we're in a good enough spot to take some points off of him for right now. Cornell Hurley's going to get 50 as well. I think he's probably a corner at the next level, so I'm kind of just grouping him with guys like Greg Ricks and Cornell Abreu. And then as you'll notice, the guys who are down to 8 schools or 10 schools, we're really not putting much points into them. I want to make up some ground with Caleb Wilson. But otherwise, we're not putting points into anybody else who has 8 or more schools in the running. So now we've got to figure out who's going to visit. We can only have 4 guys come for Week 5 against Arizona, so we have to be strategic. Kyrie Brower is not going to be one of them. We have a really good lead on him, so I don't think it makes sense to have him come and visit. I think we're going to land him anyway. I'm looking for guys who are in really close races, maybe guys we're not currently in first place on, but players who I think we need to get a boost from, and I don't think our recruiting hours are going to be enough to do that. The most obvious candidate here is the left tackle, Jaden Adai. I think there's a chance we'd be able to win him without a visit, but it's going to be really close. And I think hopefully this visit can be enough to push him over the edge. He's going to be able to see and reconnect with his former high school teammate Jazir Tolbert, which is also a win. From there, I look at some of these guys defensively. Part of the reason why I took some points off of Leon Ibrahim is that we're going to have him come as well. I'm hoping this will be enough to seal the deal. I think there's a good chance we land him anyway, but I don't want to risk it. I think he's one of my favorite players on the board and a guy who's got a real shot to contribute as a true freshman. Donovan Gossett is a guy who I would want to have come, but unfortunately we cannot because Utah has scheduled a visit for him week 5. Then I look at these corners. Cornell Abreu, we're in a really tight race with him. I think the opportunity for him to see his half-brother Ty Lord in action and be able to hang out with him for the weekend will hopefully be enough to convince Abreu to come here. From there, I look at Dylan Countess, I look at Greg Ricks, I look at Cornell Hurley. I thought about Ricks, but I have a bigger plan here. I want him to come week 8 against BYU. We're not going to schedule it yet. But his recruitment is moving pretty slowly. He's going to Ohio State week 9. So my thought is to have his visit right before Ohio State's to hopefully land him. And then Cordell Hurley will get the final spot. His visit would also be a competitive one with Cornell Abreu, which hurts both of them. Whereas 3 defensive players at 3 separate positions, it's going to be a complimentary visit for all 3 of them. So that's how we're going to use our points here in week 4. Now we're going to simulate the week. We're going to talk about some of the games across the country here in week 4. But first, I'm going to give a little update on what happened in recruiting. We're not going to use our points yet. We're going to do that in the next episode. But I'm going to talk about where some of these battles stand. Unfortunately, we don't seal the deal on Kyrie Brower. I'm hoping we're going to do so next week, but it's not going to happen today. We've got a few more guys narrowing their list down to 3, Jaden Adai and Leon Ibrahim. Both of them will be visiting this week. I'm hoping we'll be able to seal commitments from both of them on the spot. That would be pretty cool. Donovan Gossett is also down to 3. Really tight race with us in Oregon. I'd feel a lot better about our chances if he was visiting today. But unfortunately, Utah had to ruin it. A few other guys have narrowed their list down to 5. We're in first place for 4 of them and in second for 1 of them. So my plan is coming to fruition. Chris Paul, we've moved up to 2nd. Kansas State still is the lead. But again, really, really tight race with us and our 2 big rivals in the top 3. Jaden Adai is really close. Kansas State is in the mix. While Texas State, they folded. They took off their scholarship. They're moving on. Kyrie Brower, we're really close to finishing him off. We're going to be able to take some of those recruiting hours away because we don't need to put that many into him. USC's making up some ground on Leon Ibrahim. They've climbed up to 2nd. I think we made the right choice having him visit. Donovan Gossett, look how close that is. It's going to be neck and neck between us and Oregon as he commits this next week. Cornell Abreu, not a lot of teams put hours into him other than Arizona State, but everybody scheduled visits for him. We put in both hours and a visit, which gives us the upper hand right now. I will say, I think we read the Greg Ricks situation wrong. Not only has Ohio State moved this recruitment a lot faster, but we can't even have him visit in week 8. So I'm a little worried we messed that up. Cordell Hurley, still very close with us in Louisville. I think we made the right choice having him visit. And again, I like that we had 3 defensive players of different positions because the complimentary visits are going to help all 3 of them out. So hopefully, we'll be able to land Abreu and Hurley a little bit earlier than expected. Neither of them have narrowed their list down to 3. But we have seen guys go from their top 5 to committing on the spot. I know Cornell Teamer did that last year after a really good visit. So I'm hoping that's the case with both of them. We've got 185 hours left over with all of our visit scheduling, and we're going to take some hours off of Brower. So we're going to have a lot of flexibility next episode, which should be fun. Let's go over some games across the country. We'll start with Clemson and Virginia Tech. This game ended up being a lot closer than it should have been for the Tigers, but they would still get the job done in a close one, 23-17. Clemson is still number 1. I think they've gotten overhyped, though, and they shouldn't be number 1. They haven't played to that level. Lenora Sellers and David Eziomame are 1st and 2nd in the Heisman race, and I'm not really sure why, other than the fact that their team is number 1. I feel like Eziomame's gotten a little bit worse from last year. Lenora Sellers has been fine, but he hasn't been, like, first-place Heisman good. UCF heads to Boulder to face off against Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes. UCF is dangerous. I think this is going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12. And Colorado's no slouch. Granted, they're now 1-3 with this loss, and they probably shouldn't have been ranked going into the year. But they have had a pretty hard schedule thus far. Whereas UCF, I think, is one of the favorites right now in the Big 12. We don't play against them this year, which is probably a good thing, because I think they're quite good. 35-27 your final. Ryan Staub, certainly not the reason why Colorado lost, though. He had a really good game, throwing for 4 touchdowns. But he was outplayed by UCF quarterback Ja'Cory Brown, who I think is one of the best Big 12 quarterbacks we've got. He's a big threat with his legs, and he was really good as a passer. More touchdowns than incompletions. Next up, we're headed to Bryant-Denny. Alabama may have saved their season with a win against Florida State last week. But as it's been throughout the Kalen DeBoer era, when they take 1 step forward, they take 3 steps back. And that was the case here as they lose to Purdue. Now, I will say, I think Purdue's quite good. They're 4-0. They were ranked coming into this game, and obviously they're going to move up. They probably should have moved up 5 spots. I mean, they beat Alabama on the road, for Christ's sake. West Virginia, the other team who beat Alabama, has also proven to outperform preseason expectation. But Alabama with another unacceptable non-conference slate. 3 years in a row, they've started too slow. Next up, we are headed to South Carolina. Texas beat Ohio State in the last episode. I think on paper, this is the best team in the country. Should be the favorites for the national title. And I'm probably going to retract that last sentence because not only did they lose, they got smacked. 45-17. What a win for the Gamecocks. Texas falls all the way down to 15. And you know what? Deservedly so. Corin LaRoque, the sophomore, was terrific. 5 passing touchdowns. I think he had another one through the ground. He was outstanding in this game for South Carolina. 3 of his passing touchdowns were caught by Vandravius Jacobs. Very efficient game for him. Arch Manning, meanwhile, was not good. 2 interceptions in this one. Ryan Wingo, the star receiver, with another really quiet game. And then last but not least, we're headed to Ames, Iowa. 2 undefeated Big 12 teams starting conference play. I was expecting a really good game, and it was a really not good game. West Virginia blew these guys out of the water. The Mountaineers were not good in either seasons 1 or 2 of this series. That's not the case anymore. 48-7. I'm not really sure how Iowa State is still above West Virginia. The Mountaineers went into their house and beat them by 40. We're going to get to play against West Virginia in Morgantown in the very next episode. We've got Arizona and West Virginia, who are a combined 7-0, and 2 of the best teams in the conference. So our early season in-conference slate is going to be a battle. As we take a look at some other scores across the country, Oregon shuts out their rivals Oregon State in a playoff rematch from a year ago. Pretty much the same result, an Oregon blowout. Ohio State takes care of business. Washington takes care of business. I think Purdue plays Washington pretty soon. That's a really interesting game. South Alabama upsets Kentucky. Miami has a close one with Central Michigan only winning by 7. Florida State, meanwhile, beats Virginia by 45. We had conference play start in the Big 12 this week. Cincinnati over Texas Tech. TCU beats BYU by 45. Oklahoma State finally gets a win. They beat Baylor. And then even though it's not a conference game, Utah scores 10 against Florida International. Yikes. As we take a look at some other scores across the country, the Temple Insanity run continues. They beat UTSA. Missouri beats another one of their big rivals, Illinois. I guess beating Missouri is not for everybody, unfortunately. Arkansas State beats LSU by 16. I view this more about Arkansas State. They're good. They've got a really good quarterback in Jalen Raynor. Notre Dame is undefeated. They beat Iowa. They look a lot better than they did last year. Liberty looks kind of like a disaster. They lose to Ball State. That is kind of embarrassing. Tennessee takes care of business against NIU. Jake Merklinger, their quarterback, though, is injured and is going to miss around half the year. As we take a look at the new rankings, Clemson remains number 1. They shouldn't be, but okay. Oregon is at number 2. Ohio State with a loss is at 4. A lot of Big 12 representation. Kansas State at number 8. UCF is quite high. And then we've got a lot of teams marching on the doorstep. We are first out. Arizona is second out. So the winner of that game this week will be ranked. And then West Virginia, just a couple spots behind both us and the Wildcats. So we've got 2 really good teams that we're going to play against next episode. Camden Fryer and Zachariah Robinson, the players of the week. As for the Heisman race, not a lot of movement. The two Clemson guys are still first and second for God knows what reason. Julian Sayin is in third, even though he completed less than 50% of his passes. Ryan Wingo's still in fourth with 2 quiet games in a row. I do like that MJ Morris is in fifth. He is a baller for Maryland, who is proving that last year was not a fluke. Next episode, as I said, is going to be a big one. Arizona and West Virginia. I think those are the 2 best teams in our in-conference schedule. I get that Kansas State and Iowa State are ranked. I think Kansas State is quite a bit worse than those teams on paper. I think they're going to be exposed pretty soon. And Iowa State, they just lost by 40 at home to West Virginia. So if we play well in these 2 games, I think we're going to be in the driver's seat to potentially make a run for the conference championship. So these games are going to be pivotal. Coming off the bye week, well rested after doing some scouting, I think we're ready to go. Hope everybody enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.